Yeah, what I think is really cool about microsurveys is that they really flip the script on how we think about getting feedback. Instead of just like bombarding people with questions,
Yeah.
it's about asking for a really small amount of their time and getting right to the point of what we need to know.
Exactly. So today we're going to unpack, how microsurveys work,
Mm.
what they are, how they're being used, and most importantly, how you can use them to get those insights you're after.
Yeah, and the best part is, we'll be looking at how these are being used in the real world to get some pretty incredible results.
Okay, so first things first, let's define what we're talking about here. Instead of those long traditional surveys that we all dread, microsurveys are laser focused, typically only like 2 or 3 questions, and they're designed to capture that specific feedback quickly. And they can show up in all sorts of places, in an app, on a website, even through a chatbot or WhatsApp. So imagine, you're browsing an e-commerce site. You add something to your cart, but decide not to buy it. A well-timed microsurvey could pop up right then and say, like, what made you change your mind? Some powerful real-time insight.
Yeah, and that's what makes microsurveys so brilliant. Capturing that feedback in the moment.
Yeah.
With traditional surveys, you're often relying on people to try to remember past experiences, which can be really unreliable. But microsurveys tap right into those immediate reactions and feelings, so you're getting more accurate data to work with.
So it's not just that they're shorter, but it's also about targeting those moments when the feedback is most valuable.
Exactly. And, this leads to one of the big reasons why microsurveys are becoming so popular. They're just way more efficient than traditional surveys. Mm-hmm. So no more survey fatigue.
Yeah, let's be honest. We've all abandoned those really long surveys at some point, but these are so bite-sized.
Mm-hmm.
And they respect people's time.
Exactly. And because they're so short, people are more likely to complete them, which means you actually get more data. And of course, that means better insights.
Right. And the applications are endless. Businesses are using them for feedback from their customers, their employees.
Yeah.
Even, potential users.
One of the articles you sent over mentioned a company that was struggling with user drop-off in their app. They thought it was something to do with a new feature, but they weren't really sure. So they placed a microsurvey that would pop up right after a user used that feature.
And what did they find out?
Well, they were able to pinpoint the exact issue that was causing users to leave. It turns out that the feature wasn't very intuitive and needed some tweaking. They made the changes and user engagement skyrocketed.
It's amazing. It's not just about collecting data. It's about using it to make real improvements.
I think that's what's driving the shift we're seeing. Traditional surveys just aren't cutting it anymore. People are so busy, their attention spans are shrinking. They just demand a better experience. And microsurveys really do address this.
So we've talked about how microsurveys are short and sweet and effective. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the different flavors they come in.
Some of these you might already be familiar with, like the Net Promoter Score.
Oh.
Or NPS.
Oh, yeah. The classic, how likely are you to recommend us?
Exactly. It's just one question, but it's so powerful for measuring customer loyalty. But what's really cool is how companies are going beyond the basic NPS. They're using follow-up microsurveys to get more detail about those scores. So let's say someone gives a low NPS rating, a microsurvey could pop up and ask, what could we do to improve your experience?
So instead of just getting a number, you're getting the context behind it.
Exactly. And then there's the customer satisfaction score, or CST, which is all about gauging satisfaction with a specific interaction. And this can be really useful for evaluating customer service, website usability, even onboarding for a new product.
And then there's the customer effort score, or CES.
Yeah.
This one's interesting to me because it's not about delight, but more about ease. Understanding how much effort a customer has to put in to get things done.
And that can really predict loyalty. If a customer has to constantly jump through hoops, they're probably going to leave.
Did you come across any unique ways that businesses are using these different types of microsurveys?
One thing that caught my eye was how companies are using persona microsurveys to go beyond basic demographics. They're tapping into psychographics to find out those motivations and values that drive customer choices.
So it's not just about age or location. It's about personality, lifestyle values.
Exactly. And this can be so valuable for tailoring marketing messages, developing new products, even just personalizing the customer experience.
Okay, so we've explored all these different flavors. Now let's get practical.
Yeah.
When are these bite-sized surveys most effective?
Well, one area where they really shine is product feedback. Let's say you just launched a new feature on your app. Instead of waiting weeks to send a survey, you can use a microsurvey to get immediate feedback from those who just interacted with the feature Ask a targeted question like, how easy was this feature to use? And bam, you have those instant insights that can really help your product development process.
So it's like you're getting a constant pulse
Yeah,
on user sentiment, so you can course correct in real time.
exactly. And it's not just about new features. They can be great for feedback on existing features too. You can use them to identify areas where users are getting stuck, pinpoint usability issues, or just get feedback on how people are using your product.
You know, one of the articles you shared mentioned a company that used microsurveys to really reduce customer churn.
Oh, yeah. That was a really cool case study. They were a subscription service and were noticing a lot of cancellations. So they made an exit survey that would pop up when a customer started to cancel.
Smart. So instead of just letting those customers go, they used that moment to find out why they were leaving.
Yeah, exactly. The microsurvey asked, what's the main reason you're canceling? And they found out that a lot of customers were leaving because they just didn't understand how to use a specific feature. So they were able to make changes to their onboarding and really reduce that churn.
That's such a good example of turning a potential loss into a learning opportunity.
Absolutely. And the applications go even further. You know, companies are using microsurveys for competitor analysis.
Competitor analysis.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Imagine you're a software company and you want to know why customers are choosing your competitor over you. You could use a microsurvey that pops up on your website asking visitors who came from your competitor's website, what feature were you looking for on competitor's name that you couldn't find?
Wow. It's like a direct line into the minds of your competitors' customers.
Exactly. And that can be so valuable.
Okay, so we've talked about product feedback and competitor analysis. What are some other key areas?
Well, they're really valuable for getting internal feedback,
Yeah.
particularly from employees. You can use them to understand employee satisfaction.
Right.
Identify problems in your internal processes, even get feedback on new company initiatives.
So you can really get a temperature check of your workforce and address any issues before they get too big.
Exactly. And they're so quick and easy that employees are much more likely to give honest feedback.
One thing that really stood out in the research was just how high the response rates are for microsurveys. What do you think is causing this?
Well, I think it's a few things. First, they're incredibly short and focused. People are much more willing to take a minute or two to answer a couple of targeted questions, as opposed to a long, multi-page survey.
It's all about respecting people's time.
Exactly. Second, they're designed to be mobile friendly. People can take them on their phones, tablets, computers, wherever they are.
You got to meet your audience where they are.
Exactly. And third, and maybe this is the most important part, the timing of microsurveys is often really aligned with key moments in the customer journey. So instead of sending out a satisfaction survey like weeks after a purchase, you can have a microsurvey right after they interact with your customer support team.
So you're getting that immediate feedback.
Exactly. And that not only increases response rates, but it also makes the data much more accurate.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the when and the why.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about the how. Your sources had some really good tips for designing microsurveys.
And it all boils down to this. Keep it simple. The beauty of microsurveys is that they're short and to the point, so don't try to do too much in one survey.
One of the things they talked about was sticking to the goal of the survey.
Yeah.
What do they mean by that?
It means being really clear about the information that you want to gather. Before you even start writing your questions, ask yourself, what am I trying to learn here? And how will I use this information? Once you know your goal, you can write those really targeted questions to get you that data.
So you're not just asking questions to ask them.
Right. Every question should have a purpose. And remember to keep your questions short and easy to understand.
Now, the sources also said, it's important to have at least one open-ended question. Why is that?
Well, those closed-ended questions like multiple choice or ratings, those are good for getting data. But open-ended questions allow for much richer feedback because they can use their own words, which can really give you insights that you might not have gotten otherwise.
It's like you're giving them the space to say more.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to get creative.
Yeah.
Instead of asking, what did you think? Try something like, what surprised you most? Or what would you change?
Those are good ones.
And remember, the goal of those open-ended questions isn't necessarily to get a lot of data, but to understand the why.
That makes sense. The third tip was all about timing. We kind of touched on this before, but
Right.
why is timing so important?
It's about capturing those in-the-moment feelings. The closer you can get your survey to the experience, the better the data will be.
So if you're trying to get feedback on a recent purchase, you wouldn't wait months to send out a survey.
Right. You want to reach out soon after the purchase.
When it's still fresh in their mind.
Exactly. And think beyond just post-purchase. You can use them after a customer service interaction, after they use a specific feature, or if they abandon their shopping cart.
Be strategic.
Exactly.
The final tip was to use multiple channels for distribution.
Yeah. You want to meet your audience where they are.
Right.
So think about where your audience is spending their time. Is it on your app, your website, social media, email?
Yeah, and then you can choose the right channel.
And don't be afraid to experiment. You might find that some channels are better for certain things.
So we've covered a lot here. The benefits, the types, how to design them. What are some key takeaways about the power and versatility of microsurveys?
I think the big takeaway is that microsurveys are a really powerful tool for getting feedback. They're quick, efficient, and versatile. You can really understand your customers, employees, even competitors.
And by using them strategically, you can get some really good insights to help you improve your products, your customer service, and make better decisions.
Absolutely. But let's be real. Microsurveys aren't perfect.
Right. The sources did say they have their limitations. So what should we watch out for?
Well, the biggest one is that they're designed for short, focused questions. They're not great for getting a lot of qualitative data or for exploring really complex or sensitive topics.
So they're good for getting a quick read on things.
Yeah.
But for those deeper dives, you might need other methods.
Exactly. And another thing is that while they can be great at finding areas to improve, they don't always tell you how to improve.
So they can highlight the problems, but the solutions might need more research.
Right. Think of them as a starting point.
Now, before we wrap up, I'm curious, we've talked about the in-the-moment nature of these. Can you talk a bit more about why capturing these immediate experiences is so important?
Well, it's all about getting those raw, unfiltered reactions. Think about it. If you have a good or bad experience with something, your feelings are strongest right then.
Instead of having to rely on someone to remember it later.
Exactly. Imagine a customer just had a frustrating time on your website. If you get their feedback right then, you'll really understand what went wrong.
Like a snapshot of how they feel.
Exactly. And that can be so valuable for understanding those pain points.
Yeah.
And making improvements.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into microsurveys, what are some key takeaways you want our listeners to remember?
Well, I think microsurveys are an amazing tool for getting targeted feedback.
Yeah.
They're quick, they're efficient, they're all about respecting people's time.
Yeah.
And capturing what matters most.
And by using them in the right way, you can unlock a lot of insights to help you improve your products, your customer service, and get a competitive edge.
Absolutely. But like any tool, they need to be used thoughtfully. Don't be afraid to experiment with the different types and find what works best for you.
It's all about finding the right approach for you.
And most importantly, remember that the value isn't just about getting data, but about actually taking action to create a better experience.
So to our listener out there, explore this world of microsurveys. Start small experiment and see how these can help you get to that next level.
Well, one area where they really shine is product feedback. Let's say you just launched a new feature on your website or app. Instead of waiting weeks to send out a lengthy survey, you can use a microsurvey to get immediate feedback from users who have just interacted with that feature. You ask a targeted question like, how easy was it to use this feature? And bam, you've got instant insights that can inform your product development process.
So it's like getting a constant pulse on user sentiment, allowing you to course correct in real time.
Exactly. And it's not just about new features. Microsurveys can be incredibly powerful for gathering feedback on existing features too. You can use them to identify areas where users are getting stuck, pinpoint usability issues, or even just gather general feedback on how people are using your product.
You know, one of the articles you shared mentioned a company that used microsurveys to drastically reduce customer churn.
Oh, yes. That was a fascinating case study. They were a subscription-based service, and they were noticing a high rate of cancellations. So they implemented an exit survey, microsurvey, that popped up whenever a customer initiated the cancellation process.
Smart move. So instead of just letting those customers slip away, they used that crucial moment to try and understand why they were leaving.
Exactly. The microsurvey asked a simple question: what's the primary reason you're canceling? And what they found was that a significant percentage of customers were leaving because they didn't understand how to use a particular feature armed with this insight. They were able to make targeted improvements to their onboarding process and drastically reduce churn.
That's a perfect example of how microsurveys can turn a potential loss into a valuable learning opportunity.
Absolutely. And the applications go even further. The sources you provided even mentioned companies using microsurveys for competitor analysis.
Competitor analysis, that's interesting. How does that work?
Well, imagine you're a software company and you want to understand what's driving customers to choose your competitor's product over yours. You could implement a microsurvey that pops up on your website, asking visitors who have just come from a competitor's site, what feature were you looking for in competitor's name that you couldn't find?
That's brilliant. It's like getting a direct line into the minds of your competitors' customers.
Exactly. And that kind of insight can be invaluable for informing your product roadmap and developing a competitive edge.
Okay, so we've talked about product feedback and competitor analysis. What are some other key areas where businesses are using microsurveys effectively?
Well, they're also incredibly valuable for gathering internal feedback, particularly from employees. Think about it. You can use them to gauge employee satisfaction, identify pain points in internal processes, or even get feedback on new company initiatives.
It's like taking the temperature of your workforce, allowing you to address issues before they escalate.
Exactly. And because microsurveys are so quick and easy to complete, employees are more likely to provide honest and candid feedback.
You know, one thing that really stood out to me in the research was how much emphasis was placed on the high response rates microsurveys achieve. What do you think contributes to this?
Well, it boils down to a few key factors. First, as we've discussed, microsurveys are incredibly short and focused. People are far more willing to invest a minute or two to answer a couple of targeted questions than they are to complete a lengthy multi-page survey.
It's about respecting their time and making the feedback process as frictionless as possible.
Exactly. And second, microsurveys are designed to be mobile friendly. People can complete them on their phones, tablets, or computers, wherever they are.
It's all about meeting your audience where they are and making it easy for them to provide feedback.
And third, and this is perhaps most crucial, the timing of microsurveys is often strategically aligned with key moments in the customer or user journey. So, for example, instead of sending out a generic customer satisfaction survey weeks after a purchase, you can trigger a microsurvey immediately after a customer interacts with your customer support team.
So you're capturing that immediate feedback while the experience is still fresh in their mind.
Precisely, and that immediacy not only increases response rates, but also leads to more accurate and valuable insights.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the when and the why of microsurveys. Now let's shift gears and dive into the how. The sources you provided had some great tips for designing effective microsurveys.
And it all boils down to one core principle. Keep it simple. Remember, the beauty of microsurveys lies in their brevity and focus. Don't try to cram too much into one survey.
One of the tips that really resonated with me was the importance of sticking to the goal of the microsurvey. What do the sources mean by that?
It means being crystal clear about what specific information we're trying to gather before you even start designing your questions. Ask yourself, what do I want to learn from this survey? And how will I use this information? Once you have a clear understanding of your objective, you can craft targeted questions that will get you the precise data you need.
So it's not about just asking questions for the sake of asking questions. It's about being strategic and intentional.
Exactly. Every question should serve a specific purpose and contribute to your overall goal. And remember, keep those questions short, concise, and easy to understand. Avoid jargon or overly complex language.
Now, the sources also stress the importance of including at least one open-ended question in your microsurveys. Why is that so crucial?
While closed-ended questions like multiple choice or rating scales are great for gathering quantifiable data, open-ended questions allow for richer, more nuanced feedback. They give respondents the opportunity to express their thoughts and feelings in their own words, which can uncover valuable insights that you might have missed with closed-ended questions alone.
It's like giving them the space to elaborate, to provide context and detail that wouldn't be captured in a simple rating or selection.
Precisely. And don't be afraid to get creative with your open-ended questions instead of just asking, what did you think? Try something like, what surprised you most about this experience? Or, what one thing would you change about this product?
Those are great examples. It's about prompting people to think critically and share their unique perspectives.
And remember, the goal of these open-ended questions isn't necessarily to get statistically significant data. It's to gather those qualitative insights that can help you understand the why behind the numbers.
The third tip focused on timing. We touched on this earlier, but why is timing so critical when it comes to microsurveys?
It's all about capturing those in-the-moment reactions and impressions. The closer in time you can deliver your microsurvey to the relevant experience, the more accurate and valuable the feedback will be.
So if you're trying to gauge customer satisfaction with a recent purchase, you wouldn't wait weeks or months to send out a survey. You'd want to reach out shortly after the purchase has been made while the experience is still fresh in their mind.
Exactly. And think beyond just post-purchase surveys. You can use microsurveys at various touch points throughout the customer journey, after a customer service interaction, after they've used a specific feature, or even if they've abandoned their shopping cart.
It's about being strategic and anticipating those key moments where feedback will be most valuable.
Precisely. And the final tip we gleaned from your sources was to utilize multiple channels for microsurvey distribution.
That makes sense. You want to meet your audience where they are.
Exactly. Think about where your target audience spends their time. Is it on your mobile app, your website, social media, email?
Once you know where they are, you can choose the most appropriate channel for delivering your microsurvey.
And don't be afraid to experiment with different channels and approaches. You might find that certain channels work better for certain types of surveys or target audiences.
What are some of the key takeaways you want our listener to remember about the power and versatility of microsurveys?
Microsurveys are a game changer for gathering feedback. They're quick, efficient, and incredibly versatile, allowing you to tap into the minds of your customers, employees, and even your competitors.
And by using them strategically, you can gather invaluable insights that can help you improve your products, enhance your customer service, and make more informed business decisions.
Absolutely. But let's be real, microsurveys aren't a magic bullet. They have their limitations.
Yes, the elephant in the room. The sources did mention that they aren't without their drawbacks. What are some of the things to watch out for?
Well, the biggest thing is, they're really just designed for short, focused questions.
Mm-hmm.
They're not ideal for getting really in-depth qualitative data or exploring, really complex or sensitive topics.
So for those, you might need to use some other methods.
Yeah, exactly. Like focus groups or in-depth interviews.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing to remember is, while they can be really good at finding areas to improve, they don't always tell you how to do it.
So they can point out the problem.
Yeah.
But you might need to do some more research to find the solution.
Right. Think of them as a starting point.
Before we wrap up, I'm curious. We've talked about that in-the-moment nature of these. Can you talk a little more about why getting those immediate experiences is so important?
Well, it's all about, getting those raw, unfiltered reactions. Think about it. If you have a good or bad experience with something, your feelings are going to be the strongest right then.
So you're not relying on them to try and remember it later.
Exactly. Imagine, a customer just had a bad experience on your website.
Yeah.
If you can get their feedback right then, you'll really understand what went wrong.
It's like getting a snapshot of how they feel.
Yeah. And that can be so valuable for making improvements.
So as we wrap up our deep dive on microsurveys, what are some of those key takeaways you want our listeners to remember?
Microsurveys are a really powerful tool for getting quick feedback. It's all about respecting people's time and understanding what's important.
And using them in the right way can really help improve products, improve customer service, even help you get a competitive edge.
Absolutely. But remember, like any tool, you have to use them the right way. So experiment and find what works for you.
It's all about finding what works best for you.
And most importantly, remember that the value comes from taking action based on the data and creating a better experience.